There's a narrative everyone's bought about the 2025 trade war. Trump imposed massive tariffs, China got crushed, American manufacturing is winning. It sounds simple. It's almost completely wrong, because when you track where the trade actually flows, where the money actually goes, a different story emerges. China didn't collapse. China pivoted. While everyone obsessed over tariff headlines, Beijing executed one of the most sophisticated economic moves in recent history. The US did exactly what China wanted. We imposed tariffs that hurt us more than them. We helped China accelerate a plan they'd been developing for years. And here's what should terrify you. The trade war was decided in China's favor, and most people haven't figured it out yet. The surface narrative seemed simple. Trump imposed tariffs averaging 27% on Chinese goods. China retaliated. Everyone expected China to collapse, cave, come begging. For 6 months, the headlines suggested that, but underneath, something completely different was happening. China didn't just absorb the tariffs. They immediately executed a contingency plan they'd been preparing for years. They redirected their entire export machine away from the United States and toward markets where they faced no restrictions. Here's what actually happened. Americans still buy Chinese goods. That demand didn't just vanish when tariffs went up, but where they come from. That's the thing that changed completely. China's exports for 2025 are on pace to exceed last year's nearly $1 trillion trade surplus. They're not behind. They're ahead. How is that possible? The United States is no longer their largest market. Europe has been for years. But in 2025, ASEAN became their biggest market, and it wasn't even close. Chinese manufacturers pivoted supply chains away from the US and toward ASEAN, Latin America, India, the Middle East. They didn't lose exports, they redirected them. Customers elsewhere were happy to buy because Chinese goods are still the cheapest, highest quality manufactured products on Earth. Tariffs didn't change that. They just changed who bought them. China's export growth is up 6.1% for the year. September saw 8.3% year-over-year growth. This shouldn't be possible if the trade war was hurting them. But they'd prepared for this. Years ago, they'd built supply chains in Mexico, Southeast Asia, and India, specifically for tariff scenarios. They expanded the Belt and Road Initiative, built ports in Africa, highways in Latin America, trade relationships everywhere. When the US blocked them, those markets were ready. This was strategic victory, stage 1. The tariff impact became visible in agriculture, and it wasn't what the narrative suggested. US tariffs climbed from 2.5% in January to 27% by April. They hurt American consumers immediately. Prices didn't fall, they rose. Manufacturers passed tariffs through. That's how tariffs work. They're a tax on consumers, not manufacturers. But here's the real shock that should have made headlines everywhere. For years, China imported massive quantities of American soybeans for feed and food production. In September 2025, China bought exactly 0 US soybeans. The first time in years. Complete decoupling. They'd pivoted to Brazil and Argentina, September alone. Argentina sold China over 1 million metric tons. American beef imports collapsed 90%, dropping from 110 million monthly to 11 million real money. Real farmers, real communities lost. But China found alternatives. They proved America wasn't irreplaceable. By October came the headline victory. China agreed to buy 12 million metric tons of US soybeans by year end and 25 million metric tons annually through 2028. Trump won, the narrative said. But here's what nobody discusses. China already proved they could live without American agriculture. They already diversified. So why agree to buy soybeans again? Because they could afford to, because it bought them time to consolidate their new supply chain positions globally. They chose this deal on terms favorable to them. In October, China escalated to what actually mattered: rare earth export controls. China mines and processes 70% of the world's rare earths, essential for electric vehicles, semiconductors, defense equipment, everything modern. They restricted access. Said countries need licenses. Said companies can't export rare earths if they work with US military contractors. They were preparing to block American companies from accessing these materials. This was the real leverage. Trump negotiated instead of escalating. By late October, China agreed to pause restrictions for 1 year. But that's a pause, not a reversal. China was buying time to implement a validated end-user system that would systematically block rare earths from US defense and automotive companies. The trade war revealed terrifying dependence. The US can't make solar panels without Chinese materials. Can't make electric vehicles, can't make advanced semiconductors. The tariffs were supposed to bring manufacturing back to America. Instead, they accelerated China's pivot to markets without sanctions. Who actually won the 2025 trade war? Not America. We imposed tariffs that hurt American consumers. We helped China accelerate supply chain diversification. We pushed China toward ASEAN, Latin America, India. We created conditions for China to reduce dependence on American markets. China won, not because they're stronger, but because they were smarter. They didn't fight the trade war on US terms. They fought around it. They pivoted their entire economy before tariffs could constrain them. They proved they could survive without American markets. They demonstrated leverage over the US through rare earths, through supply chains, through dependencies we created when we outsourced everything. The shocking truth isn't that the trade war hurt China. It accelerated the exact outcome China wanted. A multipolar world where the US isn't the center. China trades with everyone now. This wasn't an accident. It was strategy. If this changed how you see the trade war and global competition, subscribe, because the next phase of this conflict is going to matter more than 2025. The rare earth situation is going to get worse before it gets better. China's supply chain dominance is going to become even more obvious, and the US is going to face real questions about whether tariffs actually win trade wars or whether they just accelerate the decline of American economic leverage. The answers are in what's coming next.